What if the poison we carry is not in our enemies, but in ourselves? We all know the moment. A sudden flash of anger when someone else fails us. A flicker of contempt at the person who holds the map upside down. We point our fingers and whisper our judgments. Yet rarely do we ask, why? Resentment is an ancient wound. It festers in the dark corners of the mind, invisible until it infects every thought. It masquerades as righteousness, cloaking itself in virtue, convincing us that blame is not just justified, it is necessary. Through history, resentment has whispered its venom into hearts hungry for vengeance. It lit the fires of witch hunts and fed the mobs at the guillotine. It built barricades between neighbors and drove families apart over trivial slights. And still, unconsciously, we carry it, handing down grudges like an heirloom we never meant to keep. But this is not a story about who deserves blame. It is a story about the corrosive toll of holding on to it. When we fixate on the wrongs done to us, real or imagined, we become prisoners of our own narrative. Our minds replay old grievances like a broken record, drowning out every possibility of calm, of creativity, of compassion. What if the true escape lay not in forcing someone else to pay, but in recognizing the toxin for what it is? What if the real enemy was the resentment nestled in our own chests, whispering lies about justice and morality? Tonight, we begin with a question. Can we free ourselves from the blame we clutch so tightly? To discover the answer, we must first look into the abyss of our own making and see what gazes back. And so we enter Nietzsche's own mind, a place where pride and power collide, and where the poison of ressentiment first finds its voice. A measured baritone reads from beyond good and evil. Ressentiment is a reactive state of mind born from impotence. Those words land like stones. Impotence, not simply physical weakness, but the inability to act, to shape one's world. It is here, in this gap between desire and reality, that resentment takes root. Ressentiment wears two faces. One face is reactive cruelty. It whispers that because I cannot achieve power by my own strength, I will tear down the powerful in my mind. I will brand them as evil, unworthy, corrupt. I will don a mantle of moral superiority and proclaim them fools. Every insult I cannot deliver in action, I will replay in thought, an endless script of condemnation. The other face is secret self-loathing. For resentment is never solely about the other. It is about the void inside. Each accusation marks a wound I refuse to acknowledge. Beneath the veneer of righteous indignation lies envy so sharp it bleeds. I despise those who live with ease, whose laughter is free, whose passions find an outlet. And yet I cannot admit that my own bitterness springs from the failure to live fully. Philosopher Dr. Miriam Vogel reflects, anger demands release, pity extends a hand. Moral outrage proclaims justice. Ressentiment alone buries its dagger in the heart and never lets go. Psychologist Dr. Felix Navarro adds, it is more insidious than anger, because anger moves on. Once the threat passes, the emotion fades. But resentful thoughts replay endlessly, rewiring our minds toward vindictiveness. Everyday life offers countless examples. We see the colleague passed over for promotion who begins to spread rumors, undermining reputations in secret. We see online commentators, faces hidden, unleashing venomous threads under the guise of speaking truth to power. We see spouses who rehearse old grievances, as though each new argument proves the other's inherent failings. Each time, ressentiment masquerades as justice, cloaking its true intent. Yet Nietzsche warns us, this is no harmless mental game. When cruelty and self-loathing combine, they fuse into a single toxin, unmasking our worst impulses under the guise of virtue. He writes, to understand ressentiment is to understand the roots of modern morality, the will of the powerless to dictate the world. By recasting weakness as moral triumph, resentment inverts the values of strength and excellence. What was once admired is now vilified. What was once despised is now celebrated. But resentment is not simply a philosophical curiosity. It is a cognitive emotional syndrome, a self-reinforcing spiral. Every grievance we nurse invites fresh grievances. Every subtle insult we imagine confirms our worldview, that the world is against us, that we are right to blame. Dr. Navarro explains how this loop works in the brain. Repeated focus on injustice strengthens neural pathways tied to threat and suspicion, while pathways for empathy and creativity atrophy. We become reflexive in our judgments, craving the brief high of moral vindication even as we drown in bitterness. The question then emerges: how do we distinguish resentment from legitimate anger or righteous indignation? Nietzsche offers a key: intent. Anger seeks to right a wrong and then release its hold. Righteous indignation calls for change, but remains open to dialogue. Ressentiment never lets go. It thrives in echo chambers, celebrating every small defeat of the other. By the end of our reckoning in Nietzsche's mirror, we see that ressentiment is no mere footnote in philosophical history. It is a living pattern inside each of us, in every social structure, in countless moments where blame outweighs understanding. To confront resentment, we must first recognize its two faces: the stab of moral cruelty and the ache of hidden envy. Only then can we choose whether to keep feeding their fire or to let the mirror crack and allow something new to emerge. Is almost equal to 680 words. Across centuries, resentment has been the silent architect of mass violence, a seed that, when sown in fertile fear, grows into monstrous movements. In 399 BCE, Athens stood at democracy's apex. Yet in the shadows of the agora, whispers gathered. Socrates, the gadfly philosopher, dared to question the city's heroes. He exposed vanity in generals and hypocrisy in priests. The democratic jurors, restless and insecure, saw not inquiry but insult. Their verdict was swift, guilty of corrupting youth and impiety. With cups of hemlock in trembling hands, they condemned the man who mirrored their weaknesses back to them, revealing their own ressentiment in the very act of judgment. Fast forward to 15th century Europe, where villagers huddled beneath spires, hungry for signs of witches. Every unexplained illness, every failed harvest, became proof of hidden enemies. Authorities, cloaked in piety, presided over deadly trials. Under torture, accused witches confessed to conspiracies of the devil. Communities that once shared bread now shared resentment, turning neighbor against neighbor. The carnage was not born of devilry, but of collective fear channeled into sanctioned cruelty. The French Revolution offers another chapter. In 1793, revolutionary tribunals donned the robes of justice. But justice without restraint morphs into vengeance. The Committee of Public Safety proclaimed equality, yet resentment festered among sans-culottes who saw themselves betrayed by moderate leaders. The guillotine became an instrument of moral purging. Thousands fell, not for crimes, but for perceived allegiance to the ancien regime. Here, resentment crystallized into ideology. Liberté, égalité, fraternité, twisted into the clamor for blood. The 20th century magnified resentment's power. In post-World War I Germany, economic collapse and national humiliation brewed ressentiment. Politicians invoked collective grievance, treaty reparations, wartime betrayal, to unite the disempowered against Jews, intellectuals, and communists. From this union of fear and envy sprang fascism, a totalizing force that promised vengeance for every imagined slight. Millions perished in its name. On the other side of the globe, revolutionary fervor in Russia fed off similar bitterness. The proletariat, promised liberation, found itself shackled by privilege and corruption. Bolshevik leaders channeled that anger into state violence. Show trials, purges, and gulags became proof that no one was above reproach, except those wielding power in the name of the people. Through each epoch, resentment mutated, ritualized in courts, sanctified in pulpits, propagandized in mass rallies. yet its essence remains unchanged. The powerless, feeling thwarted, project blame onto scapegoats. By recasting victims as villains, groups unite under a banner of moral superiority. They absolve themselves of true culpability while unleashing cruelty in the name of justice. Dr. Elena Rossi, historian of mass violence, observes, "Scapegoating offers a simple narrative: we suffer because of them. It unites fractured communities by focusing hatred outward. But the moment you consign others to annihilation, you cross the threshold from justice to vengeance." Nietzsche foresaw this inversion. He wrote that modern morality itself was born of ressentiment, the will of the weak to rule by proclaiming their impotence of virtue. In every tribunal that thirsts for blood, in every crusade against heresy or degeneracy, we see that same will writ large. Even today, these echoes reverberate. Old grievances resurface in new movements, and forgotten scapegoats return under different names. Yet the pattern endures. Collective resentment becomes the lubricant of terror, smoothing the gears of mass violence. As we stand on the shoulders of history, the lesson is stark. When groups harness resentment, they unleash forces that no ideology can ultimately control. Blaming others for our woes transforms individual bitterness into collective atrocity. The question we must ask is not who to blame, but how to stop feeding the fire before it consumes us all. We leave the courtrooms of history and step into the modern laboratory. Walls lined with screens flickering in electric blue, EEG readouts spiking, fMRI scanners humming like giant, patient beasts. Here, under sterile light, resentment reveals its clinical face. Not myth or metaphor, but a precise, maladaptive feedback loop encoded in our neurons. A calm voiceover begins. Perceived injustice ignites a spark in the amygdala, the brain's alarm bell. Unchecked, it floods our system with cortisol, hijacks our prefrontal cortex, and sustains the fire of resentment long after the initial slight has passed. On screen, animated brain maps pulse. The amygdala flares scarlet. The medial prefrontal cortex dims gray. We watch as neural circuits rewire. Empathy pathways atrophy, while threat detection channels grow thorny tendrils. Dr. Elena Marquez, a cognitive neuroscientist, leans toward the camera. Resentment isn't just feeling mad. It's a looping circuit. You perceive harm, ruminate endlessly, elevate your moral stance, then lash out, whether in words and ratings or in drowning someone's reputation online. Each loop cements the pattern deeper. Cut to a newsroom at midnight. Jenna, a once enthusiastic reporter, stares at her screen. Trolls mock her latest expose. Her inbox fills with venomous comments. She clicks again and again. Her heartbeat pounds. Sleepless nights follow. What began as legitimate critique becomes a personal torment. She cannot stop reading. Her cortisol levels climb. Her relationships fray. She is trapped in a cycle of moral grandstanding. She must defend her integrity at all costs, even as the tribe of trolls grows hungrier. Voiceover returns. This is the heartbreak of ressentiment. Our minds mistake rumination for righteousness. Confirmation bias kicks in. Every new insult confirms we were right. Our moral outrage feels noble, yet it tightens our cage. We transition back to the lab. Animated diagrams unfurl. Perceived injustice. A red exclamation mark triggers the amygdala. Rumination loop. Arrows spin between thought and emotion. A Mobius strip of self-reinforcement. Moral grandstanding. A judge's gavel overlays a silhouette, symbolizing self-appointed authority. Interpersonal aggression. Ripples emanate outward. Snide comments, ostracism, silent contempt. Dr. Victor Leong, social psychologist, appears in close-up. When the prefrontal cortex disengages, we lose self-control. We see enemies where none exist. Resentment blinds us, turning every social interaction into a battleground. Through a split screen, we witness Jenna's transformation. Once an empathetic storyteller, she now clicks block with abandon tweets barbs into the void, and isolates herself from friends. Her neural pathways have reshaped. The more she indulges resentment, the stronger it grows. But science offers hope. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire, means these patterns can be broken. Dr. Marquez demonstrates a simple exercise. A single session of mindfulness training dampens amygdala activity and strengthens prefrontal connections. fMRI scans show reduced red flares, a sign that the brain can relearn empathy. Voiceover. The same loops that imprison us can set us free. By recognizing the pattern, by interrupting the rumination with curiosity, by questioning our moral certainties, we reclaim control. We close with a final, lingering image, a three-dimensional brain model, its circuits gradually shifting from red back to calm blues and greens. Over that hopeful pulse, the narrator intones. Blaming others is not inevitable. It is a habit of the mind that we can unlearn. In understanding the neural anatomy of blame, we discover the roadmap out of the abyss. And so, the battleground has shifted from plazas and pulpits to pocket-sized screens that pulse at our fingertips. In this new arena, ressentiment finds its amplifier. We live in an age where a single hashtag can summon a digital mob. A whispered rumor becomes a trending outrage overnight. Algorithms, blind to nuance, reward outrage with visibility. Every share, like, and retweet fans the embers of collective anger until grudges ignite into full-blown pile-ons. Consider the story of Maya, once a mid-level influencer known for her thoughtful book reviews. One evening, an anonymous account accused her of cultural appropriation, citing a questionable screenshot. Within hours, dozens of posts dredged her past, reinterpreting benign remarks as evidence of ill intent. The algorithm sensed the engagement spike and threw her into the trending column. Followers turned on her. Sponsors withdrew their deals. The next morning, her notifications read like a verdict: guilty until proven innocent. Digital rights activist Arun Patel warns, online platforms are designed to maximize emotion. Rage keeps people scrolling. Revenge clicks keep them clicking. Every swipe reinforces the belief that they are to blame: outsiders, dissenters, anyone who doesn't fit the tribe. But this isn't just about trolls. It's about systems that monetize division. Conspiracy forums weave elaborate narratives, secret cabals, deep state plots, hidden agendas. I have an English-language YouTube script written in the dark philosophy genre. Your task is to translate, enrich, and culturally adapt it into Spanish, targeting a general audience. This is not a literal translation job. It's a creative, philosophical retelling in Spanish that maintains the emotional gravity while increasing its influence and resonance. Brain task instructions. 1. Deeply translate with emotional weight. Translate the script into fluid, conversational Spanish that reads like spoken word or internal monologue. Poetic, yet understandable. Prioritize philosophical depth, dark emotional tone, and existential questioning. Use words and expressions that evoke dread, curiosity, truth, and personal confrontation, as dark philosophy often does. 2. Amplify cultural and existential relevance. Replace examples, references, or imagery that may not resonate culturally with more universally powerful or Spanish-relevant metaphors, e.g., time is sand, cities that devour souls, ancient myths, etc. Include brief cultural proverbs, Spanish literary nods, or regional philosophical textures only if they deepen the viewer's reflection. 3. Add more value. Expand on key philosophical points where needed, e.g., if the script mentions suffering is the price of truth, you might insert a single additional line unpacking that idea in a poetic, Spanish-speaking voice. Avoid making it longer just to add words. The addition should enrich the idea, not distract from it. 4. Enhance the hook and call to action. Adapt the intro and closing, hook and CTA, to be more emotionally gripping for Spanish-speaking viewers. Reframe philosophical quotes, rhetorical questions, or challenges so they sting, linger, and provoke thought. 5. Retain structure. Keep the original structure, e.g., scene cues, narration format, but modify flow if necessary to make it more natural for Spanish speech rhythm and YouTube storytelling. Act's tonal guide. Use a voice that feels like a quiet philosopher sitting in the dark, a mysterious narrator who knows painful truths, a mirror to the soul, not a preacher. Calm, haunting, and inevitably honest. Avoid sounding robotic or too academic. The Spanish should breathe and stab softly. Strict instructions. Don't give any scenes, visual ideas, narrator instructions, etc. Only expand outline one by one. Don't expand it until user give another outline. When we confront the exact moment resentment took root, whether a colleague's slight, a betrayal by a friend, or a lifetime of small humiliations, we begin to strip resentment of its mystique. No longer an abstract force, it becomes a series of choices we can examine and revise. Gratitude, journaling follows. 4 10 minutes each morning, one writes 3 things they genuinely value: a shared laugh, a comforting routine, a small act of kindness. This simple ritual rewires the brain's reward centers, shifting focus away from what's missing to what's present. Over days and weeks, neural pathways once dedicated to rumination reroute toward appreciation, reducing the amygdala's hypersensitivity to perceived slights. From there emerges deliberate kindness. It starts small, offering genuine compliments, extending patience to difficult people, performing acts of service without expectation of return. Each gesture punctures the bubble of us versus them, reminding us that everyone carries their own wounds. Kindness isn't sentimental. It's strategic reprogramming of the mind's feedback loop, replacing blame with bridges of empathy. We follow Lena, a former online activist whose crusades against perceived injustices left her isolated and exhausted. Disillusioned, she stepped back from social media and joined a local community-building initiative. In compassionate confrontation circles, she learned to voice her anger directly and vulnerably, saying, "When you said X, I felt Y," rather than launching into personal attacks. These dialogues, guided by active listening, did not erase conflict, but transformed it into opportunities for mutual understanding. Lena found that naming her pain diffused its power, and responding to others' pain with curiosity healed her own. Psychologists introduce cognitive reframing techniques. When resentment arises, pause and ask, what belief lies beneath this anger? Whose story am I telling myself? By questioning automatic narratives, "They did this to me because they hate me," we open space for alternative interpretations. Perhaps they acted from ignorance, fear, or their own resentment. This shift from certainty to inquiry weakens the emotional grip of blame. Finally, we explore Nietzschean self-overcoming exercises, drawing on his idea of the eternal recurrence, imagining living the same life repeatedly. Viewers are encouraged to ask, if I must embrace every moment, would I choose to nurture resentment? If the answer is no, then resentment becomes a burden one must actively refuse. Through writing, meditation, or dialogue with a mentor, one designs micro-rituals of self-overcoming, committing each day to a creative project, a physical challenge, or a disciplined habit that affirms agency over victimhood. These practices are not abstract theories. They bear witness in lived transformations. Dr. Samuel Ortiz, a clinical psychologist, reflects on his patients. Clients who integrate self-honesty and gratitude see measurable decreases in cortisol and improvements in mood, relationships, even immune function. Resentment doesn't just hurt the soul, it tweets havoc on the body. Breaking the cycle heals both. By the close of this section, the neural feedback loop looks markedly different. On-screen graphics trace it. Where once arrows circled from resentment to rumination to aggression, they now branch outward, towards self-reflection, toward gratitude, toward acts of kindness. The mind becomes less a battleground and more a garden, where old roots of bitterness are uprooted and new shoots of agency emerge. This is no quick fix. The practices require discipline, humility, and a willingness to feel discomfort without lashing out. Yet each step cracks open the cage of blame, offering a clear path beyond the poisonous mirror. As the forest brightens, our guide's final reflection echoes. When we stop projecting our wounds onto others, we reclaim the power to shape our own destinies. Blame dissolves in the light of active creation, one honest choice at a time. In that light, resentment loses its dominion, and in its place, we discover the boundless possibility of self-overcoming. What if the very poison that corrodes us could, when transmuted, become our greatest strength? Nietzsche called this the will to power, not a lust for domination, but the drive toward self-mastery and creative transformation. In the crucible of suffering, resilience is forged. We begin with the voice of Viktor Frankl, recorded in whispered memoirs from Auschwitz. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. As the words unfold, archival footage flickers, emaciated figures emerging from barracks, gaunt faces blinking in the sun. Yet alongside the horror, we glimpse a quieter defiance. Notes scrawled in margins, songs shared at night, the gentlest handshake offering solidarity amid despair. Fast forward to a modern whistleblower, Annika Hansen, who exposed corporate pollution at great personal cost. We see her isolated in sterile offices, pursued by lawyers and trolls. Yet her defiance is resolute. She channels fear and resentment into meticulous documentation, forging alliances with scientists and activists. Each report becomes a spark, igniting public outrage that catalyzes real reform. Meanwhile, on the field of competition, athletes who have faced career-ending injuries emerge stronger. A Paralympic runner, once confined to a wheelchair, now races at dawn, blade foot slicing air with determined rhythm. A mountaineer, stranded by an avalanche, returns years later to conquer the same summit. Their triumphs are not denial of suffering, but proof of its alchemical potential. The body and spirit, when pressed to their limits, discover reservoirs of tenacity they never knew. Artists, too, wield adversity as raw material. Painter Sofia Delgado, who lost her sight temporarily to optic neuritis, describes how darkness became her muse. In her studio, canvases bloom with thick, textured strokes, a reflection of the chaos she endured. Resentment at fate would have chained me, she says, but love of fate, a more fatty, turned every stroke into gratitude. Dr. Amina Khalid, a clinical psychologist specializing in post-traumatic growth, distills the science behind these transformations. When individuals confront trauma and choose to find meaning, rather than collapse into bitterness, they activate neural circuits linked to growth and creativity. Their suffering becomes the substrate for new narratives, new identities. Animated sequences trace these neural shifts. Where resentment once lit up threat centers, now we see activation in the brain's reward and novelty regions. Those who had been prisoners of their pain now map new pathways of possibility. This is Nietzsche's vision actualized, a more fatty, the love of one's fate. Not passive acceptance, but an active embrace of whatever life brings. Each hardship becomes a raw material for self-fashioning, a hammer with which we chip away at our old limitations. A montage threads together testimonials. A former prisoner of war, now an engineer designing prosthetics for fellow veterans. A survivor of systemic racism, who channels anger into founding educational initiatives for marginalized youth. A refugee artist, whose murals in city streets celebrate displacement, community, and hope. Their voices overlap in chorus. I chose not to be defined by my suffering. I chose to let it guide me towards something greater. The visuals shift from muted grays to rich, vibrant color. Sunlight splashes across faces that once stared into darkness. Hands reach out to one another. Children run across open fields. Machines hum with purpose. The score swells, each note resonating with the triumphant pulse of human spirit. Yet this alchemy is not facile. It demands confronting resentment head-on, holding it within the open palm of awareness, and willfully transforming its potential for destruction into energy for creation. Nietzsche's own struggle, his physical collapse, his isolation, his descent into madness, became, in his writings, the very wellspring of ideas that continue to challenge and inspire us. In a final voiceover, we confront the choice laid before every individual. Suffering is neither a curse nor a reward. It is raw potential. Will you let it poison your soul, or will you wield it as the alchemist's crucible, transforming leaden bitterness into golden purpose? As the question echoes, the screen fades on an image of a phoenix, flames flickering, wings outstretched, symbol of the soul rising anew from its own ashes. In that image, we see the promise of self-overcoming, that in the darkest depths of resentment, we may discover the luminous core of resilience. The corridor is silent once more. Cold concrete walls stretch into darkness, illuminated only by distant emergency lights. A digital timer hovers center frame. 5, 4, 3. Each beat echoes like a heartbeat. Narrator, voice soft, insistent. In every moment, we stand at a crossroads. Will we feed the poison or pour it out? 2, 1. The timer clicks to 0. Shadows recede, revealing scenes from our journey. The flickering manuscript of ressentiment, the somber faces at which trials, the flashing neural maps, the neon scroll of digital outrage, the silent boardrooms, the dawn forest, and the phoenix rising from ashes. Narrator firm. We've seen resentment's roots, how blaming others corrodes our minds, our communities, our very souls. We've witnessed its engines, courts, mob rule, algorithms, and power plays. We've traced its loops in our brains and learned to interrupt them. We've watched suffering become strength when we choose to transmute our pain. The corridor dissolves into a cascade of key insights, each word appearing as stylized kinetic typography on the screen. Recognize the impulse to blame. Dismantle it with self-reflection. Reframe your narrative. Channel energy into creation. Choose empathy over outrage. Narrator, urgent. Nietzsche warned. He who cannot build his own world will fall for anyone else's. If we surrender our agency to resentment, we become architects of our own cage, brick by brick of grievance and complaint. A heartbeat thumps in the score. The corridor transforms into a vast, open plain under a moonlit sky. In the distance, individuals stand alone, each holding a lantern. One by one, they lift their lanterns, releasing light that coalesces into a bridge spanning the gulf between them. Narrator, resolute. But if we pour out the poison, if we let go of blame and embrace responsibility, each of us becomes a beacon. Together, we build bridges of understanding, creativity, and hope. Quick flashes. A teacher guiding students in a restorative justice circle. An engineer sketching sustainable designs rather than tweeting outrage. A neighbor offering a meal instead of posting accusations. A scientist asking questions instead of demanding scapegoats. Narrator, soft, hopeful. Resentment is a choice. Blame is a narrative we tell ourselves. But the story need not end in bitterness. The camera pans upward as dawn's first light washes across the plain. The bridge of lanterns glows golden, illuminating the faces of diverse individuals. Young and old, different backgrounds, united in purpose. Narrator, final. What will you choose? To carry resentment like a burden, or to cast it aside and build something new? The power is yours. Kinetic text appears one last time. Feed the poison or pour it out. The screen fades to black. In the silence, one final echo. What will you choose? A single key strikes, then silence. End.